We at Paxel believe that everyone should have a way to pay bills, purchase goods, send money, and build your own business with Bitcoin. On Paxful, there are more than 300 ways to buy and sell Bitcoin. Be part of the peer-to-peer community. Create an account today.
What is up, Bitcoiners? This is CK. I'm here with Ansel, and we have another episode of Fed Watch. Super excited to bring you this show. We're going to talk a lot about Fed, ECB, and all of the craziness that has happened in Bitcoin these last few weeks. Super excited to do one of our older style shows where we get into these fundamentals and give you an update on what's happening in all things macro and Bitcoin.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, BitcoinDictionary.cc, over 180 terms, important to Bitcoin, understanding Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency, all of that. You can condense years and years of knowledge in the space into 180 terms. So it's great.
I'll show it too. I got my copy of the Bitcoin Dictionary, so check it out. Good stuff. We got to start reading a term out of this. You define KYC, Keynesian economics, incentives, infinite game theory, inflation.
Oh yeah, and it will expand. I mean, there will be a second edition in a couple of years' time. You know, when I can add another double out to maybe 300 or 301. Somebody told me, "Oh, you should have made it 201 terms." Then you could put 201 terms that you need to know. But man, I just made the best 180 terms, the best terms, the most poignant ones that you need to know to understand Bitcoin. And that's what I put in there. So maybe the future, maybe we'll get out to 501. I don't know, but that's years down the road.
Let's go. Well, I love it. And you got to incorporate Bitcoin numbers whenever you can. So that's always a side goal.
There you go. Yep.
So, Ansel, let's jump into what we have planned today. Before we got into the news, we actually wanted to kind of reflect on some of the amazing guests that we've had this past month and a half on the show. We had Steven Van Meter, Lynn Alden, Danielle DiMartino Booth, our first guest, the amazing Jeff Snyder, and Stacy Herbert, also absolutely fantastic. All five of these guests are experts in their own right, and all five of them had really different opinions of what's going down in the world and what's happening in Bitcoin and macro.
Yeah, I feel honored to have all of these guests on. And one thing that we were kind of talking about offline is that we didn't even shoot for this, but we have been very, we've had 3 girls and only 2 guys. And we weren't even thinking about being some sort of gender neutral show or getting more girls on than guys. But the ones that we picked and the ones that we follow, it turned out that way. And I thought each of them have something to add to our learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, just to kind of reflect on them, it's really interesting to think of, we have Stacey talking about inflation and how that is a part of life. We have Steven Van Meter and Jeff Snyder, who are kind of coming at it from a different perspective, and they're really pushing back and saying no, none of this inflation is happening. The Fed has very little power. And then we have someone like Lynn Alden kind of coming down the middle and trying to meet the difference. And it's it for us, at least in this debate of inflation, deflation, what is actually happening. It's been very interesting trying to tease it out and understand. And I'm still trying to making heads or tails of it, but I feel like I've learned a lot. And it's very interesting to kind of get the different perspectives and, hear these experts having, differing opinions and why.
Yeah, I kind of use this show for myself to learn and go down this journey of discovering what the system currently is, how it currently works, and where we're going in the future. And the guests that we've had on, I mean, people need to go back and listen to them because, like we said, they all come from different backgrounds, and some of them are agreeing more on the deflationary side, like Steven and Jeff, but like Danielle, Stacy, and Lynn, I think are all more on the inflation side personally. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a very good mix of guests.
So let's transition into the Fed news. The Fed has been actually relatively quiet for the past, 5 weeks since we had one of these update shows. Why don't you kind of give us the skinny, Ansel?
Yes, exactly. There's not been much from the Fed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. The current situation is that they're keeping the rates at zero, at least to like 2023. That's what they've stated. So, for some sort of forward guidance to the market, they're saying, hey, we're just going to do zero for as far as the eye can see. They also have said that they're going to do let inflation run hotter for longer. So if inflation can get to 3, 4, 5%, they're going to hold off on changing monetary policy just because of that inflation number. So that's interesting. And the most recent thing maybe that they've said is that they're going to, these too big to fail banks. So JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citi, they are banned from doing stock buybacks and from doing dividends, apparently, to their shareholders because they want them to be flush with cash if there is a next leg of this crisis. So they're thinking that that's new. That's a new thing. They didn't do that in 2008. So at least they're kind of evolving a little bit with what they're trying. But the main weapon is QE and 0% interest rates.
Do you think that fiscal spending is going to happen? Because it seems as though like we're in this very strange environment where like the Fed is obviously has full discretion over monetary policy, quote unquote, and they're doing their part. And now people are looking at Congress and stuff and saying, "Hey, where's the fiscal spending? Where's the spending on different programs? Where's the cash to people in need?" Why aren't you doing that? Do you think the fiscal spending is happening, and will it, or will it happen, and will there be another bill that happens? Like, what's your insight into that?
Yeah, so we had that first one, the first stimulus checks that went out early on in the crisis, and they've been trying to get a second one passed. There's all the bipartisan politics going on in Washington, D.C. And yeah, the Fed has repeatedly said we need to have fiscal policy and monetary policy working together, marching forward towards inflation, pretty much is what they want. And even the Chair Powell spoke today at some business conference, and I saw a transcript of his speech, and that was one of his big points is putting pressure on Washington to go on the fiscal policy side to get a stimulus check back to the people, because they're starting to recognize that QE or monetary policy helps asset prices and stocks and stuff, and that helps a disproportionate, the upper 1% of people. So to help the majority of people to not have so many, the Giabo that Stacey Herbert talks about and Max Kaiser, where the people are kind of revolting against the system because they can sense that they're not getting any better off, but they see the banksters getting better off. So they think that fiscal policy is that side. So fiscal policy helps the poor and monetary policy helps the rich, kind of thing. And they want to walk hand in hand into the future, and they're pressuring Washington to fulfill their end of the bargain.
Well, I guess speaking of the Fed learning about fiscal policy being necessary for stimulus distribution, all of this is about distribution of stimulus and how accurately they can and efficiently they can distribute it. Like that's really what it is. And QE is just very, very inefficient at distributing stimulus. It really it does not trickle down. And that's kind of what MMTers have been saying. That's what MMTers have been saying. Like on top of they don't like that, asset issuance is backed by debt. They just want to issue, which is a whole nother layer to it. But MMTers have been saying that, hey, Like this QE is nonsense. Like it's not actually going to distribute any of the funds to where it needs to go. And that's why we need this fiscal spending. That's why we need to be minting, and we need to give this power back to the Treasury. So it's very interesting to see the Fed kind of update their thinking. It's very interesting to see the Fed saying, we'll let inflation run hot because it's been lower than we've wanted it, which kind of indicates that what they've been doing has not been creating inflation, which is something that the deflationists and you have been saying. So, I mean, man, it's so interesting just seeing this play out. It really is.
Yeah, they're definitely learning. And like I've said in other shows, is I think the Fed is learning nearly at the same rate that we all are learning, especially those that listen to this show. You know, they're paying attention to monetary matters, and they have no clue. They don't know any more than some armchair economist knows. There's this one guy on YouTube. I can't remember what his channel name is, something like the Everyday Economist or something like that. And he's just a guy that records videos in his car, and he talks about the Fed and what they're doing. And like, he's on the cutting edge, right? The economists at the Fed, the PhD economists, they don't know what's going on. They're learning at the same rate we all are. And it's very, very exciting time to be alive. That's for sure.
I feel like they're also learning that they don't have as much power as they think they have, which again is, I would say, is what the deflationists have been saying. And they're learning it because they're pretty much saying it. You know, if you read the tea leaves, they're saying it.
Yeah, you brought up the point about getting the money to the people, right? And one of the big things that we've noticed over the last year, and I've talked about this for a while, is the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies. And they think, like, if you read the reports that come out, maybe once a month, we'll get a different report from either the Fed or the ECB, and they're talking about this stuff. And their big point is payments. They're probably thinking this is a way to get this monetary policy to the people so that they can circumvent the banks, and they can circumvent the governments, like the fiscal policy. What is your take on the recent stuff we've heard about the CBDCs?
I mean, it really, again, it seems like technology is going in both directions. Technology is going in the direction of infinite inflation and infinite deflation, at least when it comes to enabling money. So, I mean, the CBDCs kind of enable the distribution of money that central planners wish that they've always had. It's what the MMTers have been asking for. It's the tool that they need to, you know, kind of distribute funds and centrally allocate, right? And then on the flip side, like, technology is also enabling Bitcoin and other, you know, potentially, you know, forms of money that is completely outside the reins of any sort of central control and any sort of inflation whatsoever. So, I mean, again, it's awesome. It's kind of awesome seeing it just evolve. But yeah, I mean, technology is enabling the surveillors, and it is enabling the inflationists, and it is enabling the central planners, you know, in its own way too. And it's happening. Like, and there are massive incentives for implementing them for governments. It gives them more power. It gives them the ability to sidestep checks and balances. Like, it checks off a lot of the boxes that make governments bigger. So yeah, that's my take.
It's almost like they're working against banks, like the commercial banks, and this kind of banking industry that we've had since the late 1600s, when the Bank of England, the Central Bank of England, started. It's been very, very similar. And now it's almost like they want to cut out banks by creating these central bank digital currencies that they can directly control. And they're going to have to rewrite every textbook. And that's one of the things. I think that they're going very slow. They don't really want to commit to any one course of action right now with these central bank digital currencies, because it is rewriting all the textbooks, and they don't know where that will take them.
But I mean, do they have time, I guess, is my question, right? Because, like, yeah, they're taking it slow, but the permissionless side of the equation is endlessly iterating, right?
Yeah, I
like,
think
it's never ending.
Well, they have time from the perspective of their system, because their system will just slow down. Like I've been saying, it's just going to grind down, zero growth. If there was no Bitcoin, they could extend this for 50 more years while they're trying to discover these things. But yeah, Bitcoin kind of throws a wrench in the system, and now they're racing against Bitcoin adoption and hyper Bitcoinization. That's what they're racing against. They haven't admitted that yet, but they soon will. I guarantee you, it's going to be within the next couple of years. They're going to be saying, we have to get this out because XYZ. But right now, we have this on the notes here, is the digital euro. So the ECB, they trademarked the term digital euro apparently, and they came out with their research paper. And so in there, they're talking about all this stuff that they want to do. They want to make the digital euro this and that, robust, accessible, private, and you just get the feeling from them that they're racing against somebody, like an invisible enemy, and they never name it. They never say it's Bitcoin. I think really what they're thinking at this moment is they're racing against China or the US. I think Tether is a real big worry for these people, and they won't ever name it because then it will just give attention to Tether. But yeah, I think you can feel this like kind of sense of urgency, and that is from the alternative side, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I actually want to talk a little bit more about Tether, because I think of any pundit talking about Tether, you have been the most right. Like, I've been listening to Bitcoin and markets since 2018, pretty much all 2018. And there's a lot of Tether FUD in that time. There's a lot of Tether FUD. And I mean, you not only destroyed the FUD, but on top of that, you projected what Tether was going to do, and you literally were completely correct. Like, it's really been impressive, like, seeing you comment on Tether. So, like, now Tether is something that the ECB is talking about. Like, it's been in press conferences, they brought up stable coins. Well, guess what? Tether is the stable coin. So, like, let's talk about Tether a little bit more. Like, how has it gotten to this point where it is on everyone's mind? Stable coins are dominating. They're dominating. Tether got added to Paxful. Like, Ray Youssef thinks that Tether is going to be bigger on Paxful than Bitcoin soon.
Yeah, and that makes sense because everyone knows the value of the dollar. The dollar is the unit of account in a lot of places around the world. And so it just makes sense that a digital access to a digital dollar is gigantic. And the reason why I was able to call it right, I think, was because I listened a lot to the Tether people that were creating Tether back in the day, and I knew what type of people they were, and I knew what they wanted to do with it. I knew the direction it was going, and I also understood from a economics perspective how important the dollar was. And so you put all these things together, and it's not going to be an exit scam. And a lot of the FUD was about, oh, it's going to be an exit scam, or they're under the table, they're being dishonest, right? And so I just evaluated the people and I've evaluated the product, and I said, no, this is going to be very big. So yeah, Tether will probably continue to expand, but I'm starting to get a little bit worried about it, honestly. I think that it might become too successful for its own good. And they've been able to stiff arm governments, smartly use regulation to their benefit. But even if this current court case, or this current investigation that they're under right now, if it fails and Tether makes it out of there, I think the next one will probably get them. So, yeah, I'm starting to see in the future, maybe 2 to 5 years out, that Tether is going to start going away.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that, but here is the curveball, right? Right now, Tether supposedly backs every Tether 1-to-1 to the dollar, right? $2 in bank accounts. We're seeing with Bitmex, the fact that their treasury is 100% Bitcoin is making them very, very censorship resistant and anti-fragile, even while under attack. And we're going to get into the Bitmex news. But what if Tether's treasury was 100% Bitcoin? Like, people already believe in the unit. the
Yeah.
treasury itself, the underlying is 100% Bitcoin. And if, there's just if Bitcoin's market cap is so much greater than Tether's, then it could be justified. I mean, it just depends. Like, could Bitcoin continue to support Tether on the back end? And if the answer is yes, then I mean, Bitfinex is already a sovereign company. Like, it's going to be
Yeah.
hard to take it down. It can be very anti-fragile.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. A lot of people were talking about, oh, it's not solvent, right? Because it's not backed one-to-one in their treasury. It just says on their website now that it's backed in cash equivalents. And I was like, well, it's probably because they have treasuries. I mean, they have what, $15 billion backing their coin. They probably want to put some of that into like US treasuries or something because they're more liquid. You can get a bank account frozen, but you're not going to get like your US treasuries frozen. You can always find a market for that. They're very, very liquid. So I would, if I were Tether, I would be putting at least half of my treasury or half of my bank account into US treasuries. Now, Bitcoin, that's another great thought. There is a synergy to a Tether Bitcoin backing. So yeah, if they do that, if they start doing that, that would be very, very interesting. It'd probably survive if they attacked it. Should we just get into the Bitmex news?
Yeah, I mean, let's just do that. And on a side note, I'm definitely gonna get Paulo Arduino, the CTO of Tether and Bitfinex, onto the show. I gotta slide into the DM and make sure that this show happens because y'all two gotta meet and talk about Tether and see what's going
Yeah,
through his head.
let's do it, man.
All right, well, let's go over to the other the other Bitcoin enabled exchange, Bitmex. Bitmex is under attack. Do you want to go over the high level news about Bitmex?
You go over it because you probably followed a little bit closer than I did.
Okay, so Bitmex's founder, or one of their co-founder, I forget his first name, but his last name is Reed. He was in Boston, and on last week, I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, he was arrested. And at that same time, the CFTC and other agencies in the United States filed suits against Bitmex, as well as put out warrants for arrest for the other founders, including Arthur Hayes. So right now, a co-founder is in custody, and there are warrants for the arrest for the other co-founders, and they're all at large. Bitmex responds saying that all of this is unwarranted. They did everything under law, and as a startup until now, they've done everything to comply with the United States. They also said that Bitmex will continue to run and that withdrawals will continue to happen, which I think that is what is showing the indication that it's not another Liberty dollar or anything like that. Like this is a company that's powered by unstoppable cash, and their multi-sigs are can't just be frozen. And their servers are obviously in jurisdictions where they can't just be taken down. So I'm curious to see when the DNS takedown happens. There are very centralized factors like throughout the internet stack right now, but Bitmex is proving to be very resilient, and I think that is very interesting, and it's very much enabled by Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it's very related to Tether, right? Because Tether has been fighting against governments for a long time, and now the CFTC. I don't know if they they expected Bitmex to shut down from this. I don't know, but I think it might be a different thing with the DNS takedowns. You might know better than I do about like which agencies are involved with taking websites down versus freezing bank accounts. It might be like a different type of agency in the government. And so the CFTC can charge a person for monetary matters, but then they can't necessarily touch your corporate assets or corporate stuff. And it exposes some weakness in the system, right? That the Bitcoin companies are able to withstand the initial assault of a government, and that's very, very important. Yeah.
Like think about without Bitcoin, all of a sudden all of Bitmex's accounts are frozen. I mean, without Bitcoin, Bitmex wouldn't have been a thing to begin with. But
Right. Yep.
if they had that attack vector on their treasury and on their funding and on the assets that are in the exchange, like this would be a much much bigger story. They would be done. They would have to gear up to fight. Out of their comfort zone. They'd probably have to all come to the United States and have really be at their in defensive. Whereas like now, like they're like, okay, you have one of our guys, like, but they there's no urgency. They can do things on their own terms. They're still making money. The website is still functioning. Like,
It's
is it just a
amazing.
completely different situation? Yeah, it's completely different.
Well, yeah, and like, is and this is the United States government, the most powerful financial government in the world. What if like some government like Brazil wanted to crack down on somebody there? They would not even come close to doing it. And so I think it's interesting when you compare this to, okay, this is the United States government and they cannot take down Bitmex. Now, what
Yep.
about every other government? Would they even want to fight? Or would they just be like, okay, we're going to sign some deal with them, or we're going to promote them even? Let's get a majority of trading into our jurisdiction, right? It's amazing. It truly is.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just the catalyst. Like, this is just the beginning. Like, we're seeing the cracks in the armor now, really. And I think every time like China attacks, the U.S. attacks, it's actually just going to be more and more bullish for Bitcoin because it just proves out the case that hey, your guys' hand waving and decrees aren't going to do shit. You're going to have to get on the ground and take down data centers and like get dirty. You have to go back to old school policing and skin in the game. So I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's a complete 180. Like,
Well,
I
yeah.
mean,
And
Bitcoin is the difference here.
yeah. And in 2014, 15, maybe in 16, you have these small websites, small traders. They're doing some sort of local Bitcoins business and they're evading taxes and they're doing these other things, right? And the government can't shut them down, right? Now it's multi-billion-dollar companies. They're not necessarily evading taxes, but they're evading being shut down by the government. And what's the next thing? Now you're going to have maybe a sovereign, the Bahamas or Barbados or somebody is doing a CBDC, like launching a brand new central bank digital currency, and maybe they're going to have a reserve in Bitcoin, and they're not going to be able to shut them down. So yeah, the game theory and the chessboard is getting bigger. The pieces are getting bigger. It's very interesting to watch.
So let's talk about Bitcoin by the numbers, right? In terms of some fundamentals, Bitcoin is staying very like flat at about 138 exahashes a second, which is all-time high hash rate right now. So there's no adjustment essentially last adjustment period, last 2 weeks, and then going into this next adjustment period, it's only forecasted like a 1% up, which is pretty flat. And then beyond that, in terms of number of new addresses that are being created on the Bitcoin blockchain, we are pushing up against all-time highs since 2018. So essentially 2018 hockey sticked with all the FOMO and then completely dived down and then has been slowly, if you look at the metric, it's been slowly creeping back up. And now we're starting to get to the point where it's like getting kind of close to mid 2017 levels, right? It's like actually pretty substantial on-chain address creation. So for whatever that's worth, things are trending up, in terms of the network's fundamentals.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the hash rate stuff is interesting because it is I guess the tail end of the rainy season in China, and the hash rate is where it's at. And if you do like technical analysis on the hash rate, it's pushing against all-time highs. It's been bumping against like 140 exahashes for a while. And so it's probably going to break through that pretty soon. And we're going to see a big surge in hash rate. It's also interesting from a kind of geopolitical perspective, which, I mean, we talk about this all the time on the show, but the U.S., there's several U.S. companies, right? They're trying to get 1/3 of the hash rate in the U.S. I know like Georgia, the country of Georgia, and some of those other kind of caucus nations or whatever you would call them, they want to get Hashrate into their country. And so we're starting to see a pickup in the geopolitical weapon that is Bitcoin mining. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. Fundamentals are strong. I don't see, there's no reason for a prolonged dip. That's for sure. I just saw today the guy, Keith, he is the main hedge eye person.
I
And
retweeted him.
Oh, did
It
you?
was awesome. I was like, yeah, fuck this guy.
I bookmarked a tweet because he sold all his Bitcoin, and there's no reason for a cyclical or some sort of big sell off in Bitcoin. We might have a temporary dip here. I've been kind of calling a temporary dip for a while, but no, I think that we're in the bull market. We're going up, and he's gonna look like an idiot.
Yeah, no, I retweeted him just so the world knows.
And
Feeling quite confident.
All the fundamentals are pointing to very strong price. So there's no reason for a dip.
Yeah, I mean, and if there was a reason for the dip, it would be what happened the last week with Trump surprisingly getting COVID and Bitmex, which is the biggest exchange for 2018 on getting attacked. But if anything, it just showed bullishness because Bitcoin completely shrugged those off. And sign of a bull market is price shrugs off bad news. Sign of a bear market is good news can't get the price to go up. So this is looking like prices just does not care about news at all, and things are moving upwards.
Exactly. Well, what do you think about the election? Do you think that there's going to be price movement around the U.S. election?
I think the most bullish thing would happen is if Bitcoin didn't care at all and just kept going up and just kept doing its thing. Like if we end the year at 15K, no matter what, no matter Biden or Trump, like I think that is very bullish. And I have a prediction. They may not talk about Bitcoin in this election, but 2024 Bitcoin will be a subject that is talked about very, very seriously.
Absolutely. Well, Bitcoin mining for sure. 100%. Like we just talked about that being like a geopolitical weapon. I think Bitcoin mining will be, the same way they talk about fracking on the margins of the topics that they talk about in the election. They talk about energy, clean coal or coal and fracking and stuff. I mean, Bitcoin mining will be in that league, definitely in the next election. But I think that there's going to, if you look back to 2016 and the Bitcoin price relative to all-time high, this close to the election, it's almost identical. Like we are at 60% of the all-time high or, something like that. And that was exactly what it was back there in 2016. And within the next 10 weeks, the price doubled. So I think that, oh man, this could be a very bullish end of October into November, and people will be talking about Bitcoin.
All right, let's go. We're talking about Bitcoin. This is the only back row show that talks about Bitcoin as far as I'm concerned. So keep tuning in, y'all. It's been fun doing this. I think 26 shows in. And yeah, no plans on stopping. Just going to keep rolling ahead. So much more excitement to cover. Make sure to follow me at CK_snarks. Make sure to follow the show at Bitcoin Magazine. Ansel, where can people find you?
At Ansel Lindner, and Bitcoin and Markets is my podcast. I also have a newsletter that goes out every Friday and called the Fundamentals Report. It's free, and man, it's jam-packed with charts and it's jam-packed with fundamentals like we just went over. So check that out. You can go to bitcoinandmarkets.com to check out past issues, and also the Bitcoin Dictionary, bitcoindictionary.cc.